Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Gabby. We're doing what's called a pod swap today. And in the podcast community, that's where I've been a guest on her show a couple months back. She's now going to be a guest on today's show on my podcast. Gabby's a catalyst for positive change and a rebel who doesn't like answering simple questions. And I love that about her. She has a unique blend of intellect and empathy and has a couple of traits that make her uniquely specialized in facilitating the development of transformative leaders, driving business success strategies, and elevating community initiatives for sustainable growth. She holds several degrees, certifications, and awards, and her expertise as an academic innovator and community leader is where she excels at blending research and data with complexity of humans to lead sustainable changes in businesses and communities driven by the narratives beneath each story that everybody tells. Gabby founded her business, The Nexus Impact, as a coach and consultant, hosts the podcast Nexus of Narratives, and works part time with PSI seminars supporting personal growth and effectiveness programs. Gabby, you have an awesome background that is amazingly abundant and huge in the coaching space. And I want to welcome you onto the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to share space with you. I was so fun to be on this end of it. I'm ready. I'm so excited. And it was so long ago that I sent that to you that I was like, whoa, I said that? All right, cool.
Well, that's what I loved about being on your podcast. The Nexus of Narratives is such a unique name for a podcast, and I love it because it kind of draws you into what is this about. And uh, I just love your take of everything that you've been doing, especially with PSI. I know you were training to be an instructor, I believe, at one point when we last talked, and you were going to be doing an event shortly after our podcast we recorded.
Yeah. So I my initial inspiration was to join as an instructor with them because I was like, wow, what an honor it must be to be a part of like creating such positive change in people's lives. And then so now I'm transitioning actually to be the area director here in the Denver area. We're still with like a
Congrats.
long-term goal of leading programs, but in the meantime, it's just what I've recognized, and especially as I listen to what you had just shared about me, is I care so much about building community and building sustainable change in community. And it takes every single person choosing to show up a little bit differently to like create immeasurable growth in a positive way for a community. So I have a really wonderful, unique opportunity to align my strengths and the need of the Denver community to step into that role, get our grads re-engaged, have them like giving back to the community. So there's a lot of excitement right now. And I'm like, okay, yes, let's do this now. We'll do the instructor thing later. We just had a really successful class last weekend. And so it's just really exciting for what it means for like transforming people, like being a part of people choosing to transform their lives. We don't transform it for them. But we're really grateful when, and me especially, when people come into the class and there's trust to surrender and be that vulnerable and choose different. It's so awesome.
That's what I love about the coaching space, and it's partially why I'm in it. It's exactly for what you said. Getting to watch people transform from a place of pain into a place of purpose and really align themselves authentically with who they are. And I think that's, really what the grief journey is all about, that I share with people is it's a personal transformation process. And it's where the version of us that existed prior to this grief situation we got into isn't the person that still exists after we go through it. And so giving ourselves, like you said, vulnerability to step into that new role of ourselves and meet the new version of us is one of the most powerful things we can do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And with that comes so much grace. I've found for my own self and my own journey is I often refer to different versions of me as past Gabby. And it's like, oh, this version of me at this period of my life. And with a sense of love and acceptance, and also recognizing that I am and am not her at the same time. And sometimes I'll say, okay, but I'm doing this and I'm investing in this now for future Gabby. And then sometimes if I'm really prepared and I'm on it and I've crossed my T's and I've dotted my I's, I'm like, "Thank you, past Gabby. You did great." So
Well, that's what acceptance is all about, that I share with people is acceptance is accepting yourself for all the good and bad that you are, everything about yourself, your past version, your present version of yourself, your future version that you haven't even met yet. It's all about accepting yourself holistically. And I think when we are able to do that, we don't have judgment and blame towards ourselves or shame. What we do have is appreciation and gratitude for ourselves and empathy because we all go through really hard times in our life. We go through challenges all the time. Gabby and I were just talking about how her daughter has recently learned how to throw tantrums to try to get her way. And for those of you guys listening to this podcast and not watching on YouTube, Gabby does work out a lot. And when I say work out, this girl can lift weights, I mean, just massively. So we were just joking about how she can hold her daughter up for minutes on end and not feel tired and win the war.
like, this is what I've trained for. You have no idea.
Uh, so Gabby, when you and I first talked, and we talked a little bit before recording today, but I remember you went through a lot of grief journeys in your life, very powerful ones. And I wanted to give you some space today, not just to talk about the grief side of things that's heavy, but there's a lot that you learned through those experiences. And I wanted to give you space to share your story a little bit and also what those things learned that you learned on the healing journey, because I think that's the big part I try to share with people about grief is that it doesn't have to be this negative, heavy thing that we push under the carpet, we ignore, we pretend like it didn't happen, we hide our emotions. It's a very powerful thing in our life that catalysts us towards the person we're supposed to be.
Absolutely. So even as you were teeing it up that way, and with the kind of previous little nuggets that we were sharing about how we grow to develop self acceptance and what a journey that is, and that, yes, everybody experiences trauma. And just because it's a different flavor doesn't mean any one is worse, better, harder, less significant than another. So, um, as I'm reflecting back on it, I want to share my story. I have 2 key stories that I feel like fit in very, clear buckets. The first is as I was a teenager and I lost my uncle who was like a father to me, my grandfather who was also critical in raising me, and my great-grandmother all within a 10-month period, while I was in this very critical period of my own development of myself and my self-image, and how that impacted and influenced me as I grew and what it's been like to heal from that. So that's one nugget. And the other is when my grandmother passed more recently, who was like another mother to me, um, helped raise me because my mom raised me as a single parent for more of my childhood than not. And the just really incredible synchronicities that happened with that and how that loss felt so different than the ones when I was a teen. So we'll go all the way back because I wanted to give the 2 nuggets before I kind of start on the trajectory and in the timeline. So as I was a child and a teen, I developed these beliefs about myself that if I get these great grades and I perform well and I'm a good girl, quote unquote, check the boxes of what that means, then I will be loved. Then I will be good enough. So in this time, and this is from a lot of self-reflection that I've learned now looking back. So then in this period, while I'm still in this like not feeling like enough phase of my teen years, my uncle was such a critical part of raising me. My father and I had a really rocky relationship through my youth. He chose out of my life when I was 15 around this same time. So that was a grief journey of its own without death. It was still a grief journey of, you know, being provided these narratives of you've done wrong, therefore you don't deserve to be in my life. So we're just kind of compounding these beliefs that I had developed about myself. And so my uncle was one of the few people who really accepted me, that I felt really accepted me for who I was, no matter what. We had a really close relationship. And shortly after my 15th birthday, he took his life. And I still, to this day, remember The last time that I saw him was at my 15th birthday party, and I grew up in Las Vegas, so it was a pool party, and I gave him a hug. I ran out of the pool, and I was like, "I don't care that I'm wet." I gave him a hug, and you could see the perfect imprint of the top of my bathing suit on his stomach of his shirt because he was so tall. He was like 6'10". And so I can still see that clear as day, that imprint. And it was less than 2 weeks later that he took his own life. And so my mom had come back from a business trip. She came back early. I was so excited. I was like, "This is amazing." And then I see the, like, family meeting waiting to happen in my grandparents' house because I was expecting my grandma to pick me up, and I was like, "Ooh, something's wrong." So they shared with me that he was dead. I did the denial bit, and then they immediately were like, "Well, we need to go clean out his house." I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay." So we almost immediate it's like maybe an hour later. I don't even remember the conversation. I just remember denial. And we go to his house and we start packing things up, and there's cleaning to be done. There was some basic um, cleaning of blood, taking of the mattress that was done by a crew before. And I had convinced myself that my pain was less than theirs because, oh, he's my uncle. He's not my brother. He's not my son. And my grandma found him. So she was in this huge place of grief. So then I said, "Oh, my pain is less than yours. Let me step in and take over," because there was still some blood to clean up. So I, as a teenager, chose to clean up the remainder of a couple spots, like spatters of blood. And in hindsight, probably didn't need to do that as a teenager because that was something that also deeply traumatized me. I mean, being present in there, but also taking part of that. So I held on to him for a really long time and grieved him very extremely. I missed him deeply, like held on to so many mementos. I still have some things, even like my first tattoos in memory of him. And maybe 8 months after that, the symptoms of Parkinson's disease um, kind of took over. My grandfather passed away from the symptoms of Parkinson's, the side effects. And that one was one that was a long time coming. And so that felt less catastrophic as a teenager, but it was still our entire family was still just so deeply mourning the loss of my uncle because it had completely just ruptured us as a family. There was just so much pain and grief and why did this happen and bargaining and trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense and doesn't need to make sense. And then a couple months later, my great grandmother passed away. That one was no surprise. She was, old, lived a wonderful life. We knew that was coming soon, but it was just the clumping all of them into such a short period of time during such a big time in my life, being a 15-year-old, following my father kicking me out and wanting nothing to do with me. I was like, I kind of felt like as a teenager, I was in limbo and I didn't know where I belonged and I didn't know who I was. I didn't feel like it felt like the foundation for my life had been ripped out from under me. And my family, prior to all of this loss on my mom's side, my parents had been divorced most of my life, but on my mom's side, we typically had really big family gatherings. We were very close knit. And all of a sudden it was like we went from having the Thanksgiving the year before had maybe like 15, 20 people. They're vibrant, loud, fun. And then it was my mom, my grandma, and I. And that was it. And we were like, well, this is awful. So we just spent Thanksgiving morning and just thinking it shouldn't be like this. And so then for Christmas, we decided we were gonna go to Hawaii instead. So that was fun. We're like, "We're not doing that again. We're going to Hawaii for
They're like,
Christmas."
we're gonna lighten up the holiday mood here. We're gonna go to
Yeah.
Hawaii, change the environment.
Uh-huh. I got my grandma to ride on an ATV and wear, she wore this cap it was hilarious. Um, I told her,
That
I
is
was like,
awesome.
"Grandma, you look like you're in a biker gang. What are you doing? This is amazing." And so to turn like, I'd say that was one of the coolest moments that I was like, "Oh." we can shift this. We can choose different. We don't have to choose to be miserable all the time. And so there were little moments that I felt like I noticed that track. And then as I grew and I made different choices in my life, it took me a long time to realize that I was still so desperately holding on to those relationships that I'd had with those members of my family that I had like made part of that pain a huge part of my identity of, oh, but I've been through so much and oh, woe is me, and kind of used it as a reason to not explore the greatness that could be in my life. Like I chose to allow that to hold me back and live in fear in a way. And out of that, I would kind of self-sabotage in a way like I would fear, oh, people are going to leave me anyways. I'm going to lose people anyways. I developed this like really severe abandonment trauma that showed up in the most wild of self-sabotaging patterns. So specifically, I had married someone, we were not in a healthy relationship, married, I like to say, quote unquote, my high school sweetheart. I just was like, "Oh, this is the person that I'm gonna be with, made my bed, now I'm gonna sleep in it. I'm not happy, but I made my decision." And we separated. That story is a whole nother thing, not relevant. We separated, and then when I got together with my current husband, when we were dating, I recognized these, like, abandonment cycles, and so I would go into panic attacks because I thought I was being abandoned, but in reality, he was like, "I just need a break because the emotions are intense. I wanna go, like, in a different room and cool off." But the belief that had developed in me was, "Oh, okay, now he's gonna leave just like everyone else that mattered to me had left in my life, and that this grief is gonna happen all over again." And so then I kinda lived in this place of fear of abandonment so severely that I would go into panic attacks almost weekly. And it had really awful effects on my life, my relationships, my body. Um, I was, like, at least 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I was developing an autoimmune disorder, couldn't figure out what was going on with my body, but all of the numbers were just a little bit off for every blood test that I ever did, but we couldn't quite pinpoint exactly what it was. And when I started my own kind of like healing and empowerment journey, that's when I started to realize like, oh, I've developed these really strong beliefs that everyone's going to leave me, that I can't rely on relationships, that I have to do it on my own, and like this really deep-seated belief of not feeling like I'm enough. And oddly enough, that had felt like it came out of that entire kind of grief journey. And through gosh, so I'm gonna pause there because now in my brain and my timeline, it takes me to my grandma. So a lot of like really wild beliefs that I had developed about myself through all of this time. And then my husband and I hit a low point of our relationship again through this, my own behaviors and insecurity showing up. And my grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We knew that it was getting kind of close for her. So for me, I was expecting to lose her at some point soon. I had decided to study neuroscience. This was actually a positive outcome of my uncle and my grandfather passing in such a short time. I was like, I want to know what's going on with this like electrical ball of goo in our brains. Like, how does this thing have the power to in one person choose out of life and make that decision for themselves. But then for someone else, like something else goes wrong and he has Parkinson's. For someone else, it looks like this. And other people, like I see people in my family who were raised under similar conditions that chose to abuse drugs and were never employed. And then someone like my mom who had a very successful corporate job. So I was very inspired in a way of, even though that loss was painful, of like, what is this? So as my grandmother was progressing, I was like, oh, I actually have an academic knowledge of what's going on here. And that definitely supported me to be like, oh, this is, she's no longer here. Like her body is still here. And I kind of reasoned with that grief. Like I grieved for a long time, very slowly. Of I miss my grandma. I miss the woman who helped raise me. She like her body is still here, but that personality, that charisma, that spicy lady is no longer in there, like pointing to my head. And so I had the opportunity to make peace with it before it happened, especially because she went on hospice. And my mom and I had gotten to the point where we were like, she wouldn't she wouldn't want to be on this planet anymore. So like we started thinking about her and what she wanted. And even though we didn't want to lose her, we were like, we know what her wishes would be. And so when we went on the hospice route, my mom had her at home. She was in a memory care for a short time, and then my mom said, "No, I want her at home." So she made it to where the spare bedroom, my grandmother could be in the spare bedroom. We had nurses coming regularly, and I had traveled to Las Vegas, where my family is, to be there for a few weeks to support as she went on to hospice, got everything set and arranged. At that time, I had just gotten out of working in the long-term care industry, so I was very familiar with a lot of these practices, and I was supporting my mom through it. And then we thought, "Oh, she's probably got a couple of weeks left." I was talking to the nurse, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna go back home. I have a little bit of relationship repair to do with my husband." We weren't married at the time, but, like, he and I were still working on repairing our own issues together. And I said, "I'll come back, and I'm gonna bring my work stuff. I'll pack so that I can stay here for a while. I'll be here until she passes." So I was only gonna be home for, like, 1 to 2 weeks here in Colorado. And I'm here, and then the flight that I had booked to get back home to my mom's house, the flight I'd booked to get back to Las Vegas was New Year's Eve. I wanna say it was either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, but in Colorado, there was a blizzard. And so I was like, "I think I need to reschedule my flight because otherwise I'm probably just gonna be sitting at the airport with a flight delayed, flight delayed, flight delayed." And I'm talking through this with my mom on the phone after I'd finished up a workout at the gym. And I said, "You know what, mom? DJ, my now husband, wants to go out for it with me for New Year's Eve, wants it to be part of a repair in our relationship. Otherwise, I would be sitting at the airport, likely with the flights getting canceled and delayed. And I have a feeling, if I know my grandmother, that if she knew I chose to go watch her die over repairing my relationship with my husband by spending New Year's Eve with him, she would probably haunt me for the rest of my life." And we both just started laughing. And she's like, "Yeah, you're right. Don't be here. Like, reschedule the flight, spend the time working on your relationship." That's exactly what she would want. And so we're laughing about that and just kind of teasing about like how creative she would be to haunt me for the rest of my life. And um, because she was so cheeky. And so we were having a lot of fun with that for a couple of moments. I hang up the phone. I'm like putting my bag back together. I start to walk towards my car, and my mom calls me immediately. And she goes, "Oh, she's gone." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, she was just here. She was talking. I walked back out to finish the conversation with you. I walked back in. She's gone. She stopped breathing." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, and she's like, "Keep your original flight, like the rescheduled flight. I just wanted to let you know." I was like, "Oh, okay." So wild. I'm gonna pause there because I know this is the story that you really wanted me to share.
I gotta just summate really quickly for the listeners right now. So
Yeah,
basically,
I
what
said a
happened
lot.
is, so great. So literally, you were on the phone with your mom trying to make flight plans to go see your grandmother who is in terminal stages of passing on, and literally within minutes of that conversation, your grandmother just passed right on New Year's
Mm,
Eve, right after you made your decision not to sit in the airport.
mm. Yeah, it was
That
like,
synchronicity is
oh,
just like ironic in a
yeah.
lot of ways.
I like to say it's the same day that Betty White died, and
Hmm.
not as many people knew my grandma, but she was just about as cool.
I love that.
But yes,
Wow.
yes, it was exactly that. I would say it was, yeah, just that moment that I had joked, "She doesn't want me to watch her die." Like, if there's a way for her to give me payback for that, she will. And that was it. It was, like, within a minute. It wasn't even a couple of minutes. It was my mom had stepped out of the room. We laughed. We were joking about the creative ways she would haunt me, and we got off the phone. She walked back into the room. Like, it was that fast.
I see, I can't help but like think that there's some kind of otherworldly universal thing going on in the universe that just somehow connects with things. And I feel like your grandma knew. She's like, it's my time to go. It's your time to live. Like it's
Mhm.
not no, you don't have to be here for
Yes.
me. I feel like that was her way of kind of releasing you of that, so to speak.
Mhm. Yeah, I got a feeling, and I get chills now thinking about it, like, in a way, she was like, "Okay, you finally get it. Now I can go." Which
Oh my
actually,
God.
now that I said that, I hadn't even told you this story, and this reminds me. So my other grandmother, she, is from Greece, so my father is an immigrant from Greece, and, as I'd mentioned, our relationship fell apart, and one of the last things that I told him was, when Yaya, which is grandma in Greek, I said, "When Yaya passes or gets close, let me know. I'm going to Greece with you to be with her." Like, I made it very clear, I don't care about us not having a relationship, but I wanna be there for her. And when that time came, we found out not because he was keeping his word, but other things that were happening within the family made the arrangements so that I was going to Greece at the same time. And we're on the plane together. And the flight from, um, I was living in Las Vegas at the time. So the flight from Las Vegas to Athens, Greece is like over 16 hours. And there's a layover somewhere in there. And so we had made it happen as quickly as we could. I needed to get a new passport because I had just turned 18, so we needed to expedite that. My father needed to get his passport reinstated. It was just like a whole bunch of like legalities that needed to happen. And like the moment that we had that all set, we were on the next flight. And it was about 2 hours before we landed in Athens that she passed. Like, and it was months leading up to it that we were working on making it happen to get there. And I remembered thinking there was something about, she must have been so mad at my father for, like, breaking that relationship because she and I were pretty close when I was younger. And then it was, like, that moment that it was like, "Oh, okay, maybe there will be something here." They're finally coming together that she could then release too. So I completely agree with this, like, there's something, whether it's energetically, there's something else.
I couldn't agree more with you about that. That's
There's
I
gotta be.
Because I mean, I had that same thing happen when my grandfather died. Like I had moved away from home in 20, I think it was 2019 if I remember right. Long story short, 2020, I get a call, he's not doing well and I need to come home. And I don't know why the hell I waited a week or whatever, but I come home and 2 days later he dies. And I'm like, I mean, just like you said about I went to Greece and 2 hours after you landed your your grandma's just ready to go. And it's just
Mhm,
like, what how did this all happen and line up in this the weird synchronicity of things in the world for that to happen? It's just
mhm,
it's just incredible to think about. You brought up so many topics, and I just want to say when you go through losing multiple people in a 10-month window, especially going through suicide, going through Parkinson's, when you go through heavy losses like that, all back to back, I mean, it does create somewhat of an identity crisis in you. It creates this kind of, who am I now, or how do I define my grief, and how do I move forward with my grief? Because a lot of us in the grief community, some of us get stuck in our grief and we don't want to let go of that moment. And I try to stay away from that phrase letting go because I don't think it's appropriate in a lot of ways. But I feel like we struggle to figure out where grief fits in our identity. And so I noticed how you said early on that you made a part of that pain part of your identity going forward, and that led to a lot of self-sabotage. how did you recognize that, and what were some steps that you took to break out of that and ultimately free yourself to really step into who Gabby is?
Yeah, it took a long time. That's such a cool question. And I think when I say I made it a part of my identity, I wasn't the person who was walking around like, "Oh, you don't understand my pain. I went through these things, so feel bad for me." That wasn't how I took it on. I took it on as another layer of, like you had said, that loss of identity. So it kind of felt like my identity was in limbo, that I never really cemented in, "Who am I?" Like, unshakably, "Who am I?" I couldn't have answered that question for you probably until a couple of years ago. Still polishing it. And we haven't arrived, but we're pretty dang close. And so, like, when I was sharing that I felt like it was all intertwined is because it took me making a conscious choice to face that pain head on. And rather than I had worked so hard to hide it and put on my mask of happy Gabby. See, there's nothing wrong. I'm doing great. I have all these degrees. I have all these certifications. I'm crushing it. My resume is amazing. Relationship status checked. Bought a house, check. Got the degrees, check. I'm great. Dying inside. Like it was so off. And it's very clear now looking at old pictures of me. Google has this really amazing and horrible thing where it's like 10 years ago today. And I'm like, who is that sad, sad woman? And it was a picture that I took on a day that I remember I thought I looked incredible. I did my hair. It was my first day in a new job. I was the activities director at a senior living community. I was so excited. I remember that day. But looking at it now, I'm like, wow, she was hurting. And so when I say my identity was in limbo, the choices that I made were not out of I am doing anything for me and like this is who I am and this is the path that my life is taking me. Those weren't conscious choices. I was letting others make those decisions for me. So my life was all about, oh, I should be married to the person I was in a long-term relationship with, even though I'm miserable and even though it's unhealthy. Oh, I should have a job that's going to, check these boxes. I should do all of these things. But it wasn't really me making those choices. I thought I was making those choices, but I really wasn't living my life in liberty. And so when I did start going to therapy, after I left my ex-husband because he had, dangled suicide as a threat to, me ending our relationship. And when I left that relationship and I was feeling so just lost on like, I was so empowered because I was like, "Wow, I did this thing that I never thought I could do." But I was also feeling so lost because I was like, "Who am I?" That when I started my relationship with my now husband, I was immediately like, "Whoa, I need to do something." Like, I need to do something to take care of my own mind and my own body and who am I? What is my life? What am I reacting to? Because I felt like I was just reacting all the time. I didn't feel empowered by any one of my decisions. I was just constantly responding to everything around me. And so making the choice was not just simply I'm going to go to therapy. I was kind of hit by a bus of your life is going to change or it's not. Um and that was through the rupture in my husband and my relationship. So we started going to different classes in conjunction with therapy that were designed and it was PSI Seminars who I now work with. But several different companies use similar tools, similar techniques. This is just the mechanism that we chose. And so we took the first class, and the class itself is designed to bring up your subconscious behaviors. and bring those to your conscious awareness. So whenever I'm sharing that with the class, I'm like, or with a potential student, someone who's interested, they want to learn more, I say, you will learn what you didn't know about what's not working in your life. And then you have the opportunity to choose what your next steps are. Not good, bad, right, or wrong. You can choose to be like, you know what? I'm actually going to stick with that. Or could say, all right, I realize that's not working for me. I'm going to choose different behaviors. So what I realized was, huh, that's not working for me. I am not showing up in my life in a way that is empowering me. I'm not empowering myself. I'm not giving myself any liberty. I'm not practicing this independence that I supposedly am so grateful for. I'm not taking care of my body. I am mean to the others around me. Um, and I that all just like smacked me in the face. And so then it's been now 4 years since then that I've made a conscious daily effort of, okay, how am I going to choose today to be who I want to be? And part of that is I have the opportunity to be like, who do I see myself as? And can I just like stay so focused on that vision of me, which my vision of myself is like I am catalyzing change in communities. My podcast, Nexus of Narratives, has supported people in having vulnerable conversations about belief systems and coming together across different belief systems with people that they were otherwise at odds with in conversation. That there's more community being built. There's positive social change happening as a result of building more meaningful connections in the world. And that happening by individuals making conscious choices to show up better in their lives and overcome their own stresses, overcome their own traumas, and make different choices, those things never go away. I still have to make really regular efforts to be like, oh, okay, here's this belief system coming up. I'm not going to let that rule me today. Like it's nonstop. It doesn't go away. I didn't fix it. I didn't cure it. I'm just aware of it now. And so then I have the beautiful opportunity to choose different.
That's the thing that I try to show people in the coaching realm is that our trauma really does dictate a lot of behaviors for us, and our experiences we have in the outside world, which I call people around us, try to predicate who we're going to be. They try to tell us this narrative of who we are. And a lot of times I found out on my own personal journey, and I'll get into that in another podcast episode, but I learned that who I thought I was not who I am. And that's a scary place for a lot of people, by the way, because as you brought up in a lot of ways, that we all put a mask on every day and we say, hey, look at this. I got all these degrees, all these certifications. I got this title over here. I got this thing going on over here. But deep down, we have hurt, we have pain, and we mask it a lot. And so I read a book a long time ago called The Untethered Soul. And it was a very interesting book because something it talked about is it said, you are not those things that you call yourself to be. And when I read that first chapter, I went, what the heck are you talking about? Like, and as you get into the chapter, it starts saying, you're not your job. You're not things other people tell you. You're not the title you wear every day. You're not the image that other people have of you. You're not. You're a person having a human experience. And you attach yourself to these beliefs and these constructs and these ideologies, these titles, these jobs, these roles. You attach yourself to it. Even in grief, by the way, we attach ourselves to that grief. You know, Gabby said it really well that a lot of us make our pain part of our identity when it's really not. Um, one of the craziest parts of advice I ever got when I lost my grandfather was that was his experience. It wasn't mine. I got to have my own experience being present for that, but it was not my experience to carry. It was not mine to own. It was not part of my identity. It was not who I am. But when you're in the midst of grief, when you're in the throes of it, it's very hard to see that. And it's very hard to separate yourself from that situation and just say, I got to experience this. And instead, we take it on like it's, oh, my pain isn't as bad as somebody else's pain, or, oh, somebody else has it worse than me. And we get into that comparison land. And that's where those beliefs and constructs start building is from those situations. When in reality, that's just a lie we're telling ourselves, and it's actually breaking ourselves away from who we are. Um, so to be able to step into that role to say, I am not those things I experience. Those are experiences I have. And back to what Gabby was talking about, where I was trying to tie this all into, is those beliefs, by the way, become subconscious. They become autopilot, and where we don't think about them constantly. And Gabby brought up a great way of saying that every day. She said, yes, 4 years ago, I figured this out. I found this. But every day, I've got to make a conscious decision to say, this is who I am. This is where I'm focusing. I don't define myself by these things. And that takes a lot of work.
It's not easy. It's not. And so, I mean, even the other day, I'm like laying in bed and some of those, subconscious beliefs, think they come up and I want to react. I want to do something. And my husband's like, "You're being very quiet right now. This is unlike you. What do you have to say?" And I was like, "Nothing. I don't. Because whatever I have to say, it's not going to be good. So I'm just not doing it this time." Like, it's all the time. And so something that you shared, it brought up it had forgotten this analogy that you'd shared, your experience where you said your grandfather's death was his experience, and then you had your experience. And so something that I find really powerful that I remind myself of regularly, and I bring up with people that I coach as well, and they love it and they hate it at the same time. And I love it and I hate it at the same time when I think about it, is like the concept of an experience is neutral. Someone dies, there's a car accident, glass falls off of a shelf. An experience itself is neutral. It is a thing that happened. And the reasoning behind that is because if you lose your grandfather, I lose my grandfather, someone else loses their grandfather, we all have different meanings attached to it. Someone died, like in this situation of speaking about grief. Death happened. That's an experience. Now, the meaning that then I extrapolated and created, that's a story that I built around it, that then created my beliefs, that then or validated the beliefs that I already had subconsciously that I wasn't aware of. So this one situation happens, someone passes, I don't pass a test. Like no matter how big or small the situation itself, the experience itself is neutral. What's not neutral is a story that I created about it to prove myself right, that I have certain subconscious beliefs about myself.
That's really powerful, what you just said, because that's where we're able to differentiate those experiences. And something else you said earlier, by the way, is experiences are not good and bad. They're not right and wrong. We always try to label and what I call box these things that happen to us. And I say, what if you were just the observer of life? What if you were just there to say, I experienced this. I don't have to say it's good or bad or right or wrong, or I stand on this side of the fence or this side of the fence. But if I say, I just witnessed this, I just saw, I experienced it. Um, when I lost my child, this is gonna sound really weird, by the way, but I lost him 2 years after losing my grandfather, and I chose for whatever reason in that crazy mindset I was in. I partially was blanked out in that moment, but I remember asking myself and saying, this can either be a really bad experience for me that I will live in infamy of. I screwed up, made a mistake. I can do all this negative thing in my head. Or I can sit there and say, I can make this a beautiful experience. Even though it's the worst thing that's happened to me, I can still make it a good experience. And I chose that day. And I did that subconsciously that day because my mind was in 10,000 directions. But I'm just using that as an example that, to Gabby's point, we can take these experiences of our own and we can create a story or belief, good or bad. We have the power to create that. It doesn't always have to be, like I said, this negative thing that happened. Um, your grandma passed away. How ironic is it, by the way, that you and your mom were joking about plane flights and when to go meet her, and then grandma passes within minutes of that. I mean, at that point, who's to say that was a bad experience? Maybe that was grandma just saying, I'm at peace now because I know where things are at. Or maybe there was some kind of connection between you and your grandma in that moment that she knew for some reason that this was at peace. This is the end. This is okay. Who's
Mhm.
to say that that wasn't a good experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience for me because I still laugh about it. And it was one of the more joyous and more connected times of my life. This was the moment where, and it's because of the story that I created around it. Again, grandma passing. So many people have experienced loved ones passing, and then their experience is very different. So mine was, this is happening. My now husband chose to come with me to Las Vegas in a time that our relationship was ruptured. He's working on rebuilding relationships with my family. And he said, I'm going to put that all aside because I want to be there for you and your mom. And so, she's on hospice. My mom and I are sitting at the bedside crying, and he's rubbing my mom's back, telling her how strong she is. Like,
Mm.
that was one of the most beautiful moments that I have experienced in my adult life, especially around grief. And I still get teared up about it because to me, experiencing my grandmother passing was one of the few moments in my life that I got to experience unconditional love. And
Mm.
how cool is that?
See, that's really powerful what you just said, by the way, because you talked about tying your emotions to that experience. That's something deep in coach. I get into that in very deep coaching sessions, but to make it surface level for the podcast, this is a big point that Gabby brought up, and it's something we all don't really think about in the moment, but we realize it after the fact, is we do attach ourselves to these experiences, but we do it through emotions. And what I think is really powerful, Gabby, is that you had a rough relationship with your father growing up. There were things there that maybe love was not unconditional. It was conditional on
Mhm,
things. You talked a lot about when you were going through school. If I do this, if I do that, I'm good enough. I'm a good girl. I'm worthy of love if I do this. So you had a belief construct that love was conditional in there, and
mhm.
that got subconscious at a certain point because it started
Oh, yeah.
filtering out, right? But I watched as you teared up talking about that moment with your grandma, and I saw that you made that connection really quickly because unconditional love is something that you may not have gotten a lot of growing up, or you never knew how to look for it for whatever reason. And
Right.
when it got shown to you, this is the power of emotions, people. This is a very powerful story that Gabby's sharing. That emotion was so strong because it said unconditional love. I know what this is. I see it. I've felt it. I now get it. And now that rewires that thought of if I do these things, I'm good enough. Now becomes I'm worthy of unconditional love. I know what unconditional love looks like. I now know where to find it and how to find it. I think that's
Mhm.
such a powerful story you just shared.
Yeah, ugh, and I've just been, covered in goosebumps ever since it came back to, I had completely forgotten about that until it came up in that moment, and exactly that is, now I know what that feels like, and I realized through reflecting on that experience, through creating my podcast, through what I feel like is my personal purpose in my life, is I am seeking that. I'm seeking to create that for others because of how painful it was for me to feel unloved and to feel like I wasn't enough and to feel like love was conditional or dangled. And that doesn't mean that, my mother didn't love me unconditionally. That absolutely doesn't mean that. It's just really interesting how tricky our minds are. And so then to experience that powerful love in that moment, and then again, and that's why I say one of the most powerful, because the other one that I felt that unconditional love was when I delivered my daughter, between my husband and I. And so then it's really interesting because I'd shared earlier how I had so many moments where I would go into this space of abandonment trauma. And my husband got the bad end of it so many times because of those beliefs that I had about myself. But then now I have this evidence that says, when those default subconscious beliefs come up that say, "Mm, but does he love you?" I'm like, "Pfft, are you kidding? We got evidence." And it's so easy to shut it down. And I have so much evidence for when my brain tries to get real tricky with me, because it is a very tricky little thing that I'm like, no, we know what this is.
Well,
We know
when we
exactly what this is.
Well, when we go through grief, we're in a very emotionally vulnerable place. And this is something not well talked about in the grief community for whatever reason, but we're in an emotionally vulnerable place. And what happens when we're there, by the way, we are like little sponges of the world. We will soak up good, bad, right, wrong, and different. We'll pull all that stuff into our brain. And then what Gabby just said is true. Once we pull that stuff in there, now this thing starts trying to play tricks on us. Like, Well, are you sure he loves you? Are you sure it's this over here? This doesn't feel safe over here, and here's why. And this conscious little brain of yours starts to play tricks on you and starts to sit there and say, nah, I'm not sure you believe that or not. Go over here. And you have to constantly have that mind battle when you're in grief. You always are in, I call it like an inside internal battle, an internal war, because you are having to sit there consciously and go, do I have evidence that supports that? Does that even make sense? Is this real? Is this right? Is this what I've experienced? You really have to question what comes up with your mind because your mind isn't made to make you happy, believe it or not. It's meant to survive. So if it sees a perceived threat of any kind, it's going to go, ooh, threat, fear, run away, do something different, like get away from this. And that's why people that have panic attacks and anxiety, I will say those things are for lack of a better term, they're a made up feeling and emotion. And I'll share why, because they're not tangible. It's your brain auto firing a simulation of something that is not true, but it's making you believe it's true. So it's just getting really strong and really powerful to overtake your conscious mind. And that's why panic attacks are very scary because you feel this overwhelming power in your mind of this construct in front of you, but it may or may not be true. And if you have to find that strength within yourself to question that thing. Just like Gabby shared today a lot in this podcast, when she said, does my husband really love me? Well, yeah, I have evidence. I have proof. Like when you get that big, by the way, and you're in a panic state or you're in an anxiety state, it will start to go down because you're starting to deflate that belief system. You're deflating that construct because your brain in survival mode for some reason said, this isn't right, this isn't true. But then you're sitting over saying, I have evidence, it is true, it's okay. You can balance out those harsh emotions by really taking off the mask and just being authentic and true to yourself because you know what you believe, you know what you've experienced. I do believe everybody that has experiences, the truth between things and what's not. Sometimes it takes coaches like Gabby and I to come along and just ask the right question to get you to see it. But you do have power over your thoughts, you really do. And so, but we're just not taught and shown how to have power and control over that. And that's the scary part. That's why those things can be very scary moments of life. But
Mhm.
when you regain
Yeah.
your control, you can take your
Yeah.
power back.
Absolutely, and so to get a little nerdy on that and to, like I so biologically, when we go into that fear response, I love how you brought up that, like, simulation thing, because the really wicked thing about our brains is they don't know that it's a perceived threat that we've made up and we've simulated versus, like, we're actually gonna be eaten by a lion right now. Like, our brains don't know the difference. And so, like, what happens in our brains, and this is one of my favorite fun facts. So, we have blood flow through our entire brain. And what really separates us out from any animal that has primal instincts, so we have that very deep internal part of our brain, very central. And then what makes us human is the external part, all the other parts outside of that. So that's where we have our executive thinking. That's where we have like our senses, our hearing, like our vision is back here. And so in um, any kind of animal, they have like those core things that we also share, but now we have this other higher level of thought that's in the external parts of our brain. Now, when we go into that fear response, we are in grief. Our body, our mind feels like it's under attack, whether that's our belief systems feel like they're under attack, we are going through trauma, we're stuck around an aggressive driver, or there's an actual lion in front of us, or we're in a fight with someone that we care about or don't care about. Our brain doesn't know the difference. So, the blood flow in our brain from being like going everywhere to all these fantastic parts of our brain, it goes just to the primal spot. Like, so our body is literally only resourcing our primal instincts because it's like, "Oh, we just need to make sure that this body is going to survive." So, the executive thinking, all of those amazing things that make us human literally go offline.
Yeah.
So so, yeah, of course, when we react in those moments, when I went into panic attacks, when other people do when we're reacting, yeah, oftentimes when we come out of it, we're like, "What the heck did I just do?" And that's
Exactly.
exactly why, because, like, our brain is literally not functioning. So then the beautiful invitation is how do we get that blood flow out so we can start thinking again? And there are tons of really great techniques for that. Um, explore them, find whatever works for you, because I'm not a doctor. What worked for me was I did a bilateral stimulation. So, like, if anyone's looking at the video, I'm crossing my arms. I would hit my legs one leg at a time with my arms crossed, or I would hit my
Mm.
shoulders one at a time, arms crossed. So my right hand is hitting my left shoulder, my left hand is hitting my right shoulder. And what that would do, it was bring blood flow out of my brain, because I'm stimulating parts of my brain that are external. So, like, our
Mm.
sensory of our body is an external part of our brain. And so by hitting those different parts, by crossing, that means I'm bringing back online those different areas of my brain, getting some more blood flow going, forcing that blood flow. And then after a couple of minutes of doing that, I'm solid. I'm good to go. So if I would start to
I love
spiral and
that.
my husband would see me like hitting my legs or hitting my shoulders, he'd be like, "Oh, okay, she just needs a minute." And then she'll be back. Then my wife will be back.
That's really good advice about that, because that couldn't be more true. We end up in those when we have panic attacks and anxiety, our primal instinct of the brain kicks in. And that primal instinct, by the way, is survival. The brain says threat, fear, like all those big words that trigger people. And that's why, when you see mass panic in society, when we have that fear trigger thing go off, common sense is out the window. Every man for himself comes up. That's the body's way of saying, I got to protect the body. And
Mhm.
I love that you do that hitting. I'm gonna try that next time I have an anxiety attack,
Yeah,
because I feel like that would work well.
it's
I
amazing.
My only
10
way
out of
I've
10.
I've I've told people, when you have anxiety, by the way, another thing to build off of that is ask yourself what that anxiety is trying to do for you. Because there's oftentimes a message with an emotion that's coming through that's not being heard. And your body's anxiety, that vibration, that fear thing in your chest, it's something not being released. It's something not being heard and seen. I remember doing UPW with Tony Robbins back in 2020, and I freaking died because I'm watching a Zoom call with 35,000 people across the world. And he just grabs the camera guy behind the camera, just grabs the camera guy, and he starts dancing like kids in the thing up on the stage. He's just dancing around. He goes, "When you have anxiety, this is what you need to do. Dance with your anxiety. Dance with it. Ask it what it wants." And I'm sitting there laughing because I'm like, "What the hell are you even doing right now?" But I learned that, anxiety is a heightened fear state. It's a very heightened sense of awareness, and there's just something not being released. But when you take time, I highly recommend doing what Gabby did to get that blood flow going, because that definitely moves things around and shifts your physiological state. But ask those powerful questions when you have anxiety. Say, what's causing my anxiety right now? Or is there a thought or a feeling or something I need to learn or be aware of right now that I'm not paying attention to? And I'll share with you guys, if you sit with yourself for 5 minutes while you're having that and you go, "Oh, I'm really anxious because I got a job interview tomorrow. I'm really anxious because I don't know how this podcast is going to record." I've had those things happen to me. When I sit there and say that, and I say, "It's going to be okay." Actually, funny story. You're fine. You're breathing here. You're right here in the room. I always tell people to look around your room too. Look around your room. What you're trying to do is tell your brain, we are safe. There is nobody here trying to hurt me. There's no physical harm being present. I'm not going to have to do, I always use the other phrase too. You don't have to. I love that phrase. Start telling yourself that when you have anxiety, by the way. I don't have to feel this way right now. I don't have to. But my body's making a choice for me, but I don't have to. And start giving yourself those things to take your power back, because grief can get very overwhelming. It can feel very isolating. It can feel very out of your body, your nervous system, by the way. That's why I love what Gabby said about hitting your shoulders in a cross pattern. Your nervous system is deregulated, and that's why you're feeling so much of that out of control sense. And that's where anxiety and panic attacks live, is that out of control nervous system, and being in that heightened state of awareness so much. But when you can get that blood flow moving, like Gabby said, and I always say exercise. When I have anxiety, I jump on a bike and I'll bike until that thing's gone, because it's just how I can distract myself, but also get that blood flow moving. Um,
Mhm.
those are powerful ways to move through that. I appreciate you sharing that technique. I plan on
Of
using that
course.
today.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many other good ones. Another quick one, because you said look around your room, is name the things that are around your room. What is the item? What is the color? So if I'm like starting to get wound up and starting to feel overwhelmed, I might be like brown couch, wooden flower, water glass, brown table, black microphone, white remote, white light, yellow lamp, white wall panels. Like, because then it takes you completely out of that thought pattern. And then for me personally, not for everybody, but for me personally, then it becomes so much easier to be like, what was I so wound up about? Oh, that's it? Oh, okay. That's silly. And then, like, respond to it however my higher functioning self does. Then it becomes way easier for me to start to think through, because otherwise I start to overanalyze. I'm way too analytical sometimes. And then I start to spiral myself again. And then I'm like, okay, again, white panels, beige curtains. Like, so yeah, that's a little
That's
easier sometimes when you almost feel like you can't get your body to do the movement.
And I also encourage people to, when you are in those places, especially if you're having a panic attack, by the way, go to what is comfortable for you. Comfortable,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
my thing, I call it the CSF, comfortable, safe, and familiar. And so if that means sitting on the couch with your favorite blanket, and don't judge because I know you all have a favorite blanket at home. I know it
Yeah.
happens. Sit in your favorite spot on the couch. Put on that TV show that makes you feel happy, that one that makes you laugh, that one that brings out that nice, calm side of yourself. Put yourself in that really comfortable, really familiar environment. You'll be amazed how fast that will go down for you. And to Gabby's point, too, by the way, when it does come down, you're going to be in that space to go, okay, well, what caused me to feel that way? Or how did I end up here today? And, you will be able at that point to say, oh, well, I was scared or nervous about this. And it's going to come that very calm place versus the heightened state you were in. And by the way, when you do get to that place and you acknowledge what happened, give yourself a celebration of some kind and say, you know what? I survived that. I didn't like that. That was not fun, but I survived it. I got myself through that today. And I think that's another thing, and I'll wrap up the show on this one too, is celebrate your small wins as you go through grief. Gabby shared with us today some really powerful processes of going through grief, identifying yourself with your grief and your pain, so much so that it can create self-sabotage and create identity crisis where you forget who you are and you don't even give yourself a chance to really ask yourself that question, who am I? And I want everybody to take away too, by the way, from today's podcast, what Gabby said about 4 years of this working through these things. It takes years. This is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. But it's a continuous process of consciously being in yourself and putting yourself first and giving yourself an opportunity is the way I like to say it. Give yourself a chance. The world will take care of the rest of that stuff, but give yourself a chance, because that's really where the power can be found.
Yeah. And you deserve it. And my last sentence on that to add to it, because that's so fantastic, is be compassionate with yourself. Commitment to growth on this journey, it's hard, and commitment is a new renewable resource. You can have a really hard day and choose again the next day. You have the choice to choose again to show up differently for yourself every single moment of every single day. So it's okay. There are hard moments and you can recommit to that growth every single moment.
Beautifully said, Gabby. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, as we wrap up the podcast, I usually ask my guests a couple questions at the end. One of them
Yeah.
is, if you were to run into somebody who is just going through grief or maybe feel stuck in grief, what's one or two things you would share with them to help them navigate that journey just a little bit easier?
Ooh, I think it's so unique to the person and where they're at. So I would start by just first asking, how are you? How can I support you? What do you need? Like, it's to me, that's empowering, and just inviting whatever the words are. What is inviting a compassionate, understanding response from the other person to show that I'm safe, right? I want people to know that I'm a safe space to share.
I love that because what you said too, in the way that I phrase that is you're giving power to the griever. You're
Mhm.
you're not trying to fix them or tell them it'll get easier or they can get over it. You're not saying any of those things that we most commonly hear, but you're giving them space to say, "Hey, I'm going to hold space for you. How can I best support you today?" And letting them dictate and guide that course. That's really
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's up to them, right? Like, I don't know the answer. I know it would work for me, but that doesn't mean it'll work for them.
So, Gabby, I got to ask you this, because this was a fantastic podcast episode. If people want to connect with you, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I am on social media. You can find me at Nexus of Narratives, or you can look up my name, Gabriella Richardson. I'm not the only one, but or, my website, nexusofnarratives.org. So that's nexusofnarratives.org. That's my podcast. That's my website. All the contact info for that goes straight to me. And then if you want to find any other tangents of how to find me, you can find them through there. So I'll keep it simple.
I love that. And for our listeners today, I will have Gabby's social links and her website link in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on Podbean or Apple, it'll be in the show notes there. If this is on YouTube, just look in the comment section, and I'll make sure you guys can find a way to connect with her.
Thank
Gabby, I
you.
just want to say thank you so much for having an incredible session today, sharing your experiences. I know you've gone through a lot of grief and a lot of loss in your life, and the biggest thing I want to share with our listeners today is Gabby shared a powerful journey through grief, and it was an empowerment journey. It was one of self discovery, figuring out who her identity is. And she's still demonstrating today, by the way, even 4 years later, she still is consciously making an effort working towards that. So, this journey of empowerment on the Empower Grief journey, just like Gabby is today, this is not a one end stop be all. We finished the journey, it's complete. It's a journey for life and something to work on constantly. And she did such a great job of sharing that story today. So I just want to say thank you, Gabby.
Yeah, and thank you. It's a lifelong journey, and I know I'm in it for the long haul. So 4 years in, decades to go, and I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for sharing space with me and being such a compassionate listener and sharing some really great conversation. This was an awesome conversation. So thank you. This really filled my cup today. It was a little chaotic to start. So this was wonderful.
Well, you're really welcome. Hopefully, we can do another episode down the road. It'd be really fun to bring you
Absolutely.
back.
We'll just keep going back and forth. I think we got a lot that we can dig into still.
I love it. We'll definitely make that happen. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Gabby and I today on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Gabby's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast so we can be found on Apple and Spotify. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you guys to know you're never alone in this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.